Jennifer, good to see you. And in case it looks like everyone who's here knows that this is the class that they're attending. There's no one accidentally came. So we're going to begin with some prayers, most of which you know, but Snehi will put them up. Sangye churang suki chognam la, changchu baru dagni kepsu chi, dagi chunyen ki pe sognam ki, rola penche sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. Sangye churang soki chognam la, changju badu dagni kepsuchi, dagi chunyen gi pe sognam ki, drola penche sangye drupa sho. So taking refuge means mainly taking refuge in the Dharma. That's what actually protects us from suffering. Then a short mandala. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. So when it says, O holy and perfect pure Lama, one can think of that as being our primordial guru that has been looking after us from beginningless time. Since beginningless time, we've been enmeshed in samsara, trying to get out. But when Lama Yeshe passed away, Lama Zopa gave a eulogy at Tushita and mentioned he considered Lama Yeshe to be his primordial guru. Lama took the aspect of being the primordial guru, looking after us in all ways. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. So we're going to begin with a little concentrated meditation to try to set our motivation. Relax your body, relax your mind. Excuse my hoarse throat. I do have some lozenges here, so hopefully that will help a little. Put your mindfulness on the breathing after having first recognized it. That means think of your breathing. Say, oh, I'm breathing. Once you recognize it, hold it in mind in the sense of recognizing when you're breathing in, when you're breathing out, whether it's a long breath or a short breath, and let go of all other continuity of thoughts that you've been having, or if they arise during the meditation, just rest your attention away from them, put it back on the mindfulness of the breathing. Having disciplined your mind a little through that exercise, now put your attention on the more subtle objects, the nature of your mind. Look at your mental consciousness with your mental consciousness, like one part of it looking at the rest of it. Notice the mental consciousness is aware of what your senses are perceiving, perhaps your eyes. That's why you close your eyes partially. What your ears are hearing, what your body is feeling, what you're tasting. In my case, the orange lozenge. So divest yourself from those and just look at the nature of the mind within which those appearances are occurring. Which is called the conventional clear light nature of the mind, without conceptions, free of conceptuality. When conceptions arise, let them dissolve back into that clear light nature by not paying attention to them. This is also called the developmental Buddha nature, as opposed to the non-abiding Buddha nature, the ultimate Buddha nature. This is the conventional Buddha nature. Which, when you pay attention to it, and you recognize that there's no hindrance in the mind to developing the thoughts that we have not yet developed, the mental factors, the wisdom, the compassion, and so forth that we have not yet developed. There's no hindrance in the mind to doing that. And that there's no reason that we can't eliminate the faults in our mind, the habit energy that we've had for so many years of this life and since beginningless time. This can bring great joy. It's wonderful if you can associate that joy with this clear light nature, because that's similar to the kind of unification of bliss and void that we experience in higher practices. The fact that we can recognize this is due to the fact that right now, in this specific life, we have a perfect human rebirth, a life of leisure and endowment, or as the Buddha called, an auspicious moment, when we have all the factors necessary to progress rapidly on the Dharma path. If we open our mind to more than our own plight, where we might seek nirvana through developing wisdom and renunciation and so forth, very arduous path to escape from cyclic existence for ourselves. If we go beyond that, recognize the plight of all other living beings, suffering without a protector, without a guide, without an authentic protector or guide, seemingly doomed to rebirth in the lower realms next lifetime because they use up what virtuous karma they have had in the past, created in the past, and create stores of negative karma. Taking them into consideration, thinking, I must become myself enlightened so that I can perfectly, effortlessly, spontaneously lead them out of suffering over whatever number of lives it might take. Like I mentioned before, the primordial guru who's been nudging us since beginningless time. For their sake, I must become a Buddha. To do that, I need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, especially exemplified by Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, the text, where it especially emphasizes the collection of wisdom, but also in the Madhyamaka the commentary by Chandrakirti that Lama Khapa is following. Also, the collection of merit is mentioned in great detail. So we're going to listen. Think of that way. I'm going to listen. I'm going to participate today, listening, hearing the Dharma, contemplating, meditating, in order to accumulate the two collections for the sake of becoming enlightened, in order to benefit all other sentient beings. See if you can develop that thought, what we would call bodhicitta with effort. Not spontaneous bodhicitta, but we have to generate it through logic and through effort. Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to sign up again.
So good to see you. Wonder if anyone has any. Can you hear me okay? Okay, my volume doesn't have to go up. I'm fighting with a frog in my throat. I've got my strepsils here, so I may be popping some more in. I've got some warm water also. So to begin, any questions that are left over from our previous class or general questions before we begin? Hapka, are you okay? Okay, good. John's running out to get his notebook, it looks like. David and Karen have COVID, and so they said because they're coughing a lot, they're going to keep their camera and microphones off, but they're there, as you can see, they're listening. Savansh, did you get the? I thought you were off with the family. Is that finished? Or am I confusing you with someone else?
No, Venerable George, I was with the family, but I have returned from India.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're back. Okay, excellent. Okay, so no other questions? Snehi had a question.
Not a question, Venerable George. Just, we wanted to just confirm the dates with the class, and I know some people need to leave early. So I was wondering if this would make good time.
Excellent. Good suggestion. So next week will be the last class of these 8 classes. There will be a 1-week break, and then we will begin on, what is it,
March 16th? March 16th.
And continue for 8 weeks, unless there is some obstacle with Easter weekend, which is in the middle of that.
Yeah, so March 29th is Good Friday, and then March 31st is Sunday, Easter Sunday, and then we are scheduled to have a class on March 30th. And Venerable George just wanted to make sure it wouldn't be a problem because it's kind of Easter weekend for people if they have families or they need to travel or something.
Anyone have any? Okay, so there's not a lot that doesn't look. There may be someone, but you'll be able to listen to the recording. So let's assume then that will be the schedule. There will be 8 consecutive classes starting on March. What was it, Snehi? March 16th?
March 6th. March 16th.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes. So
I have a follow-up question. So will there also be a discussion session on the 18th following?
yeah.
I'm sorry, not the 6th. I meant next weekend. next Saturday and the following Monday after that, will there be discussion?
So after the last class, sometimes we haven't had discussion. How do people feel? Those that come to discussion, do you want to have discussion on that Monday?
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll have discussion. So everything is okay. So I, at the suggestion of, I believe it was Suvansh, or maybe it was Mikhail, I can't remember, mentioned this text commentary on Kamala Shila's Majjhamaka, what was it? Majjhamaka Aloka?
I think so. The Aloka, yeah.
So I had, there is up on the website, I think, maybe I had sent it to Mikhail and he shared it on the website. But here I wanted to mention from a text by a lady named Rusai Kaira. Is that right, Paul? Am I pronouncing that right? Do you know that?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that, Venerable George.
It's Majjhamika and Epistemology, a study of Kamala Shila's method for proving the voidness of all dharmas. So on page 10, she listed from Kamala Shila's text what are called the 5 great reasons for establishing emptiness. And so you can see that on the web, what do we call it, the Facebook group page. But here I'm going to mention it again just for some kind of clarity of what we're talking about. Generally, what we're using now is called the diamond, or say the Vajra splinters, or the Vajra slivers. Some people translated it as diamond slivers or so forth. So the first one she quotes here is the diamond splitters. That's the Dorje Segme Tensik. That's the one that we're dealing with here, that phenomena are not born from these, from self, from other, without cause, or both self and other, or without cause. Then there's the reason refuting the production of existent things and non-existent things. If you see the document that's up there, it will have the Tibetan and Sanskrit names. So we may talk a little bit about that in the discussion group on Monday, but it will come also later. That's not one of the main reasons used here. Then the third one is the reason refuting production according to the tetralemma, which she is taking as, here is Mushi Keigoki Tensik. Mushi means the 4 alternatives. Then the fourth one is the reason consisting in dependent origination. So the Tendelgi Tensik. So that's sometimes called the king of reasonings, the reasoning of dependent arising. And then the fifth one is the reason of being neither one nor many, which is the main reasoning that Shantarakshita used in his text that Mipam Rinpoche wrote a commentary for. So those are 5 reasonings. But in Jeffrey Hopkins' book, Meditation on Emptiness, he mentions in the Prasangika system, he mentions this on page 61, if you happen to have that book. In the Prasangika system, the 7-fold reasoning, the reasoning of dependent arising, and the diamond slivers are the 3 main forms of reasoning for establishing selflessness. So the what he calls the diamond slivers, or the Vajra slivers, is the one that we're dealing with here, not being born from self, other, both self and other, or causelessly. The 7-fold reasoning will go into detail when we talk about the selflessness of persons. It also involves sort of like an elaborated form of the absence of being one or different. Remember, in generally when we talk about the 4-point analysis, we talk about the person is not one with the aggregates, not inherently one with the aggregates, not inherently different than the aggregates. So the sevenfold reasoning is an elaboration of that, adding more details. And then the reasoning of dependent arising. Those are the three main reasonings. Then Jeffrey Hopkins said 3 other forms are the refutation of the 4 extreme types of production, the refutation of the 4 alternative types of production, and the reasoning establishing the lack of being one or many, which are 3 of those 5 that we just talked about. So in the Prasangika system, it recognizes all of those, all 5 that were mentioned in that text by Shantarakshita, where he goes into great detail about the logic of being neither one nor many. That's different than one or different, same or different. The Prasangika accepts those, but they mainly use the sevenfold reason in addition to that. So among those is the dependent arising, among those 5 is the reasoning of dependent arising, and the what is it called? The diamond splinters or the diamond slivers or the vajra slivers. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that to begin with. Okay. Don Isaacson is sending me a call for some reason on my phone. So I'm not going to, you're right there. You can talk to me if you need. Do you need to say something?
No, I got a strange message when I went into Zoom, but I do have a question. Could I get the page numbers we're on since I missed last week's meeting in the 2 texts?
Yes, definitely. So we are starting on Jimpa's 123 and the FPMT version that Joan Nicelle, Venerable Joan, created on page 101. Okay, so
And Hopkins?
we've already passed, Anne Klein's book that has finished. The Anne Klein's book with Jeffrey Hopkins only went up to a certain point. So the 2 texts that we have now, rather than Anne Klein and Jimpa, we have FPMT's version and Jimpa.
So we're not using compassion in Tibetan Buddhism.
Oh, that finished before the 6th Bhumi. That just was the first 5 Bhumis. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll just read the sentence that we'd finished last time. In this Chandrakirti tradition, however, arising from other does not exist even on the conventional level. So we had talked a bit about that last time. The FPNT version, page 101, paragraph 4 translates, therefore there is no production from other in this system, even conventionally. So that might seem strange because generally we think that Prasangika does accept that phenomena do arise, so they have to arise from one of those 4 ways, one of those 4 positions. They actually do arise from a merely imputed other. They don't arise from an inherently existent other. So that's what's meant here. Therefore, there is no production from other in this system, even conventionally. So what that's talking about is that earlier in that paragraph, it said, Jimpa's translation said, so arising from other or production from other is not a convention of the scriptures. It is a convention of the philosophical schools. So generally, phenomena do not arise from other because the expression arising from other presupposes that you're talking about an inherently existent other. To say that phenomena arise from other conventionally, you have to actually say that they arise from a conventionally existent other or a mere other. So that's where we got last time. So then the text continues. We accept cause and effect to be distinct entities on the conventional level, right? They're different than one another. But this alone does not meet the criteria of what constitutes arising from other. This is analogous to the following, as is stated, and as I mentioned, I think I mentioned last time, this verse 623a, which you'll find later in the text, and I joked last time that Jimpa's notation 623a is how he's translated it into English, the first line. Actually, it's in the Tibetan, it's 623b. But anyway, as is stated in 623, given that each and every phenomena bears dual natures on the conventional level, nature is something that does not exist, something that does exist, but such a nature is not accepted in terms of intrinsic arising. So that's what we just read that last time. So the FPMT translation says, although the two, causes and results, are indeed asserted to be different entities conventionally, simply that is not the meaning of production from others. So what's the point here? The seed and the sprout, let's say, use the example. The seed is the cause of the sprout. Causes are accepted conventionally to be different entities. Causes and their effects are considered to be different entities. That's what's being talked about here. Although the two causes and results are indeed asserted to be different entities conventionally, simply that is not the meaning of production from others. So that means simply saying that the seed is the cause of the sprout and that the sprout arises from its cause, that simply that is not the meaning of production from other, meaning the sprout being created from something which is other than it, its cause, the seed. Although conventionally every phenomena that holds each of these two entities, as is said, has an established entity, it is not asserted to be the entity of inherent production. Okay, a little bit complicated, right? Let's go back to the previous statement where it said, therefore, there is no production from other in this system, even conventionally. Or as Jimpa sort of put this system, he said Chandrakirti, but we say this system, you could also say Prasangika in general. So Geshe Zopa, in commenting on that, said, therefore, in this system, this Prasangika system, Shenke Tane du Yangme Do. Shenke means production from others. Shen means other. Ke means arising or produced, production. Where am I here? Shenke Tane Du. Tane means in world convention, Medo. So the production from others doesn't exist even conventionally or even in conventional parlance. Generally, Shenke Kewa means just Shen Sam. That means mere others. That exists. But in the Prasangika system, a little later it is stated, and this is a very famous quotation I think I mentioned last time, Detarna, in that case, Shenke Shenni Shen Sam Shik Mingi, Ranjingi Drupe Shen Yimpe. Did I quote this last time? Paul, were you here, or John? No. Okay, so this is a famous statement. What it says is the Shen of Shenke, that means the other of other production. When you talk about other production, the other that you're talking about is not a mere other. It is an other that is established inherently. So that's a famous dictum that's coming up as Lama Tsongkhapa explains about production from self, from other, and so forth. When you talk about production from others, the other there is assumed to be an inherently existent other. That's why production from other is refuted. Make sense? Ron, you look like you're like a deer in the headlights. Okay. When we talk about other production, we're refuting other production, right? We refute these four extremes, essentially. We will refute in detail production from itself. That means being the same entity, like the sprout exists as the same entity as the seed and so forth. We refute production from an inherently existent other. We refute production from both self and others. And we refute production which arises without a cause, causelessly. So the other that is being refuted is an inherently existent other. It's not refuting that things arise from a mere other, merely existent other. That the Prasangika does accept. But in the terminology that's used, generally when you're talking in the scriptural tradition, when you talk about production from others, it's presupposing, like say in the lower tenets, everyone is accepting from the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, the Chittamatra, even the Svatantrika, that on the conventional level, which is what we're talking about, production is taking place on the conventional level, right? Conventionally, on the conventional level, phenomena do exist inherently, and production is inherent and inherently existing. So that when you talk about production from other, that means production from an inherently different or inherently other, inherently existing other. Making sense? Okay, some people nodding. Have to think about this. Nadine, what do you think? Making sense?
Yes.
Okay, short answer. Okay. Anna, you following?
Thank you, Venerable George. Still following and processing.
Okay, processing, good. Mary Ellen?
Yes, if what you mean by it comes from something that's totally different. So
Not just totally different.
inherently.
Inherent, yeah. So the sense that the lower tenets all assume that on the conventional phenomena have a findable existence, an inherent existence. They're able to be set up by themselves. That's what we call inherent existence, which the Prasangika refutes. Some of the tenets refute, like the Svatantrikas, they refute truly arising or true production, but they still say that phenomena arise inherently. That is, from an inherently existent other, because the phenomena exist on the conventional level inherently. So Geshe-la said, that Shen, is inherently other. inherently existing others. From inherently existing other causes, it arises inherently. That is the meaning of Shenke, and that is what's being refuted here. Okay, so that's where we're at. So then Jhimpa's text continues. The Prasanapada, the clear words or clearly worded, states that the thesis that things are devoid of arising from themselves, that's the first of the four alternatives, right? Rising from themselves, dakke, that is a non-implicative negation. And this is true also of the other three propositions. Non-implicative negation. I think that's a term that seems like that's Western philosophers tend to like that term. Usually what we've used for in the Jeffrey Hopkins translation sort of continuum, we say non-affirming negation. What does that mean? Non-implicative, non-affirming. That means when you negate something, this particular kind of negation, when you negate it, it doesn't imply anything else. It doesn't affirm anything else. You just say, there is no self. When we talk about emptiness, we say the absence or the lack of inherent existence, right? That's the emptiness of inherent existence, the lack of inherent existence. That is a non-affirming negation, or you can, as Jhimpa translates, non-implicative negation. When you say that phenomena do not inherently exist, you're not saying anything else positively, that they do exist some other way. You're just negating that. Okay? For some of you who've studied this for some time, this is nothing new. You've heard this a lot. Okay, so Jhimpa says, clear words, the Prasanapada states that the thesis that things are devoid of arising from themselves is a non-implicative negation. And this is true also of the other three propositions. So when you negate arising from other, that is a non-affirming negation. You negate production from other, but you're not affirming anything else in its place. You're not implying anything else in its place. And the same thing for both self and others, and arising causelessly. That's what it means is the other three propositions. Therefore, when establishing the absence of intrinsic existence, the thesis to be established must be a non-implicative negation, must be a non-affirming negation. That is the simple elimination of what is being negated. So in the FP&T translation, it says, the statement in clear words that the inferences that have as their result only the refutation of what others propose. Oh, wait, am I reading in the right place?
No, Venerable George, I think it's the part that starts in clear words, the thesis regarding the non-production.
It's
I think middle of page 103. Oh, sorry, printed 101, PDF 103.
okay. Middle of 10, yeah. So therefore it's not, okay, I'm trying to find that here. Let me see. So although the two positive effects are indeed asserted to be different entities conventionally, blah, blah, blah. Clear word states that the thesis that things are devoid of arising from themselves is a non-implicative negation. Where is that on the FPNT? Paul, do you see that?
Unless I'm mistaken, I think that's in the middle of printed page 101,
Middle.
right after, although the two cause and result.
Are indeed asserted to be different entities conventionally. Simply that is not the meaning of production for others. Okay, so in clear words, the thesis regarding the non-production of things from self is explained to be a non-affirming negative or non-affirming negation, which Jimpa translates as non-implicative, as are the other three theses. Therefore, that which is to be established in the context of settling non-inherent existence is itself a non-affirming negation. That is the mere elimination of the object of negation. Okay, it's making sense so far when we're talking about negation here. So this is stated in the clear words when it says, since statements such as whatever sounds there are in the world, they are all unreal, quote unquote, and quote, nothing exists, quote unquote. Whatever sounds there are in the world, they are all unreal, and nothing exists, are found. The intention is to express the negation without implication. So the meaning of unreality here is the absence of inherent existence. So that's Jimpa's translation of a part of Prasanapada, of the clear words, which to put in some context has some other what the Prasanapada is quoting, where it says, whatever sounds there are in the world, how did Jimpa put it? Whatever sounds there are in the world, they are all unreal. So that statement is not stated in either Jimpa's or the FPNT text. That actually comes from a sutra with a very long name, the Arya Sarvadharma Svabhava Sammata Vipachita Samadhi Nama Mahayana Sutra. It's not one that is rolls off the tongue. So in that it says this particular statement comes from that sutra that Chandrakirti is quoting in the Prasanapada. It says Jikten Dena Nedayopa Tamche Ngome Chiang Me Mepa She. That's the part that's translated here. And then it says Detar Burna Jikten Dempai Dayang Nampa Shintu Jungwagyur. So there one could add to that statement the aspects of the melodious speech of the guide of the world utterly arise. So that's where it says here, such statements as whatever sounds there are in the world, they are all unreal. That's quoting from this sutra. And the statement that nothing exists, which you find many sutras, they are such statements as whatever are found. I'm not sure how that morphs together. Since statements such as so and so are found, such statements are found, such as these, the intention is to express the negation without implication, or to express a non-affirming negation. So the meaning of unreality here is the absence of intrinsic existence. Or as the FPMT states, such statements as, in this world, whatsoever terms exist, all are insubstantial, nothingness. She puts the two together. Actually, they're two different statements, which occur in this work and so forth. It doesn't appear in this work. They appear in other sutras. Jimpa's translation is a little bit better there. They state non-affirming negatives, non-affirming negations. Therefore, the meaning of insubstantiality is the meaning of non-inherent existence. Making some sense? A little bit difficult, little bit difficult to understand.
Venerable George?
Yes.
I think another name for that sutra is just the Samadhi Raja. I think that's the long title of the Samadhi Raja. The king of meditative stabilizations or king of samadhis.
Right. It is in there, Samadhi Raja Nama Mahayana Sutra. So that quotation can be found in the Samadhi Raja Sutra. Thanks, Paul. I didn't notice that was the correct shorter title that you're more familiar with. So such statements as whatever sounds are in the world, they are all unreal, and other statements such as nothing exists are found. The intention is to express the negation without implication. When we talk about things are being unreal, insubstantial, and so forth. So the meaning of unreality here is the absence of intrinsic existence. Okay, so let's continue. So the auto commentary, Jimpa's translation says the commentary, that means Chandrakirti's auto commentary says, having stated the four theses, now to establish these through reasoning, I will explain. So in Chandrakirti's commentary, in the Madhyamaka Bhasham, his auto commentary, he first gives this first stanza from Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, not from self, not from other, not from both, not without cause, nothing ever arising anywhere in any way. So these, having stated those four theses, now to establish these through reasoning, I will explain. Okay, so that's what's coming now, to explain how to establish these. Then Jimpa translates, later on, using the negation of arising from the four extremes as the reason, things are spoken of as being free of intrinsic arising. Furthermore, at the end of negating arising from the four extremes, Clear Words states, thus this establishes that there is no arising. It is not the case, therefore, that Chandrakirti does not wish to establish that things are devoid of intrinsic arising. So getting a little bit subtle here. When he mentions the Clear Word says, therefore production does not exist. So in Anne MacDonald's translation, that phrase, I think it's on page 152. I think some of you may have downloaded that from the protected site or from the group page. She translates, therefore, this has been proven, namely, that there is no arising, and since arising is impossible, dependent arising qualified by non-arising is established. That's her translation for that section. So the statement in the Clear Words that the inferences have as their effect. Oh no, I'm jumping. So we're just talking about this previous sentence. Furthermore, at the end of negating arising from the four extremes, Prasanapada states, thus this establishes that there is no arising. It is not the case, therefore, that Chandrakirti does not wish to establish that things are devoid of intrinsic arising. or as in the FNT translation says, therefore, it is not that Chandrakirti does not wish to establish things are devoid of inherent production. He wants to. Okay. The statement in clear words, continuing, the statement in clear words that the inferences have as their effect only the negation of what others propose. That again is a quotation from the first chapter, the 11th verse of the Prasanapada. The FPT translation says, the statement in clear words that the inferences have as their result only the refutation of what others propose. This refers to the fact that propositions are there only to refute inherent existence adhered to by others. The meaning is that apart from this, they do not establish anything else. This statement does not, however, reject the establishment of that simple negation. Whoa. Okay, what is this talking about? The inferences that have as their effect only the negation of what others propose. So some of these inferential statements, some of these inferences, their intended result is to negate what the position of other people. They're not stating explicitly Prasangika position. They're just refuting what others are proposing. So this refers to the fact that propositions are there only to refute intrinsic existence adhered to by the other, or by the non-Prasangikas. The sense here is that apart from this, they do not establish anything else. That's just what the inferences have as their effect, only the negation of what others propose. This statement does not, however, reject the establishment of that simple negation. Okay, a little bit complicated. Let's continue. Likewise, there is the following statement. As for us, we do not establish this to be either non-existent nor existent. Rather, we refute what others impute to be existent and non-existent. So when refuting what other people say inherently exists or inherently does not exist, because when we talk about existence and non-existence, they form a dichotomy, right? There's nothing other, there's no third choice or fourth choice. Phenomena either exist or they do not exist, right? So in the lower schools, when you talk about things that they accept as being existent, they accept them as being inherently existent. And they talk about things as being non-existent. That means an inherent non-existence, which is kind of hard to get your mind around. What inherent existence means is one thing. What inherent non-existent means is another. But both of those terms, they accept as being inherently, having the qualifier inherent with them. Inherent existence, inherent non-existence. So we do not establish this to be either non-existent nor existent in our system. We're not saying that they we're not stating right here, although you could say that the Prasangika position is that we do accept that things merely exist and merely are non-existent. That's not saying here, it says for us, the Prasangika, when we're using these syllogisms, we're not establishing this to be either existent or non-existent. Rather, we're refuting what others impute to be existent and non-existent, because they impute them to be inherently existent and inherently non-existent. This is because our wish is to clear away the two extremes and to establish the path of the middle way. So this actually comes near the end of the Prasanapada in chapter 20. So that's not, we don't have a translation, and MacDonald only translated the first chapter of Prasanapada, so we don't have a translation of that. Making some sense? We'll come, as we go back over it again, it will become a little more clear. So this is mainly talking about the position of the Prasanghikas. In refuting these positions, you know, these four alternatives or the diamond slivers, we're not affirming anything in their stead, in their place. We're just refuting them totally. As for us, we do not establish this to be either non-existent nor existent. Rather, we refute what others impute to be existent and non-existent. This is because our wish is to clear away the two extremes and to establish the path of the middle way. The two extremes would be inherent existence and inherent non-existence in this case. Okay? How are we doing? Completely confused? Okay, someone shook their head. No, not completely confused. That's good. Okay, so let's continue. Chimpa's translation. The meaning of this statement, too, or also, is that one merely eliminates the two extremes of existence and non-existence as adhered to by the other tenet systems, by others. And apart from this, nothing else is to be established. It is not the case, however, that the simple negation of the two extremes is not being established, for it states that the wish to clear away the two extremes and to establish the path of the middle way. For it states that the wish is to clear away the two extremes and to establish the path of the middle way. If things are not established as devoid of intrinsic existence, then since there is no third possibility, what does that mean? There is no third possibility. Mikhail's not here today.
It can't be devoid of intrinsic existence and both have intrinsic existence and be devoid of intrinsic existence. That would be a third.
If things are not established as devoid of existence, then since there's no third possibility, this would entail that things have intrinsic existence. If things are not established as devoid of intrinsic existence, this would entail that things have intrinsic existence because there is no third possibility. I think what this is saying is that things either intrinsically exist or they intrinsically do not exist. There's no third possibility. They form a dichotomy again. If things are not established as, so put that qualifying phrase, then since there is no third possibility, put that at the end. If things are not established as devoid of intrinsic existence, this would entail that things have intrinsic existence since there is no third possibility. They either are devoid of intrinsic existence or they are intrinsically existent. There's no third possibility. What do you think? Hapka? This section a little bit complicated. How are we doing? Sean, you complete? You're here? Okay. This is clearly stated in averting the objections, it's another text by Nagarjuna, or on page 102 in the FPMT text, it says refutation of objections. That's usually how we translate this text by Nagarjuna. There it says, for if what is devoid of intrinsic nature negates the absence of intrinsic nature, then with the reversal of the absence of intrinsic existence, things will have intrinsic existence. Venerable Joan translated, if it is not inherently existent, how does it rule out inherent existence? If non-inherent existence is overturned, inherent existence is thoroughly established. I think that's more to the point. I think the first two lines are a question by the opponent. It says in Tibetan, it says, Gelte rangshin meni ki chite rangshin meladok. Jimpa translates it as though it's part of our Prasangika position, but I think that's the position of the other person. As Joan says, if it is not inherently existent, how does it rule out non-inherent existence? Not sure. If it is not inherently existent, how does it rule out non-inherent existence? If non-inherent existence is overturned, inherent existence would be thoroughly established. So I have to admit, I did not research this sufficiently to see the context here in the text by Nagarjuna, what was coming right before that. Whether the first two lines are a statement of the others, some question by the others, where it's saying, if it is not inherently existent, you Prasangikas are saying that things are not inherently existent. How does it rule out non-inherent existence? Not completely clear to me what's being said there. So Paul or John, do you have a thought about that?
I think you've got it right, Venerable George. If I remember correctly, that's the opponent criticizing the Madhyamaka position, saying, well, if you claim that your positions lack inherent existence, how can that refute something that does have inherent existence? I think it's the opponent sort of questioning how a thesis of non-inherent existence can refute an inherently existent one.
Right.
Something
Thank you for that. Right. I think that is the context. So the response then is the last two lines. If non-inherent existence is overturned, inherent existence would be thoroughly established. If you were to overturn or to reject non-inherent existence, then inherent existence would be thoroughly established. Okay. Snehi, you have your hand up, I think.
Yes, Venerable George, only to say it's a little bit past 2. Would this be a good time for you to stretch your legs?
Yeah, let's just take a very short break. I'll keep my mic on to listen to if you have any interesting conversations. We'll just take a 4-minute break.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah, Stephen circulated I don't know if it's actually the text, is it? It is.
Refutation of objections.
Yes, it's the Nagarjuna's Vigraha Vyavartini and some, I'm not sure whose translation, but has anyone pulled that up?
I think it's Jan Westerhoff's.
Okay, so we have And it's according to Jimpa, it's verse 26, is that right? Yes.
ACIP 82A. Does he say it's verse 26? I didn't notice that.
Yes, he does.
366. Yes, verse 26. So can you pull that up from?
Yes, so I guess the Jan Westerhoff's translation of that verse in Nagarjuna goes as follows: if substanceless things are refuted by something substanceless, when what is substanceless is abandoned, substance would be established.
Oh. Can you read the stanza right before that?
Yeah. Well, the one right before is is Nagarjuna's own reply to the prior objection.
Okay, so this whole thing is an objection.
No, I think it's back and forth.
Okay, so go on.
Yeah, so what it looks like is 25. Is that right? We don't quite follow his how he's numbering these, but yes, verse 25 is an opponent's objection, followed by also numbering 25, which is a reply.
So 25 has the objection is the first part, and the
reply is the second part. That's what it looks like. Maybe I'm reading that incorrectly, but allow me to read it's not long, so I'll read starting from the objection, which is to the prior verse. If you were of the opinion that it is like, quote, do not make a sound, end quote, this would not be adequate, for in this case, there is the prevention of a future sound by an existing one. And then the reply to that is, you do not construct the example, quote, do not make a sound, end quote, successfully. That is the prevention of a sound by a sound, but it is clearly not like this in the present case. So again, it's heading in the direction of talking about how the lack of inherent existence undermines its ability to make a critique of inherent existence, I think.
So that was the previous verse.
That was the previous verse.
Right. And then his translation of this verse
again is, if substanceless things are refuted by something substanceless.
Okay, so Jimpa translates that as if what is devoid of intrinsic nature, that's substanceless, I guess, negates the absence of intrinsic nature.
Right. He's construing that differently for sure.
And then the last two lines?
When what is substanceless is abandoned, substance would be established.
Okay.
So if something without intrinsic nature is refuted by something without intrinsic nature, when what is without intrinsic nature is abandoned, substance would be established. So this is the opponent.
Paul, do you have another translation of the refutation of objections? This is
I'm looking that up. Yeah. John, what verse was that you were reading?
This is verse 26. And I know there's an earlier translation by, I think the name was Bhattacharya.
Right, I think so. You were reading Jan Westerhoff's translation, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me see what I have here. Tola and Dragonetti did a translation. They were students of Wayman's, and I seem to recall there was some problems with that. Let's see. I will keep looking. See if I can find it. I don't think Hopkins has translated that verse. certainly not in the earlier works.
Okay, so let's leave that for research. I'll try to have some more clarity of that in our discussion group Monday.
Oh.
Let's has another point now.
Okay, actually, I think maybe Betsy Knapper's dependent arising and emptiness quotes, I guess maybe it's just two of those lines. Also in Jeffrey's middling exposition of special insight, if non-inherent existence were disposed of, or if non-inherent existence were overturned, inherent existence would be thoroughly established. I'll send you the page references for that.
So that's the last two lines of that, right?
Right. And those are quoted in a middling exposition of special insight. So that's Lama Ding, Jeffrey's translation, and also I guess in Betsy Knapper's Dependent Arising and Emptiness, which I think is also middling exposition.
But they don't have the first two lines of
But
that.
they don't have the first two lines, no.
The first two lines sound like perhaps the opponent's position.
I
And the
think
last
so.
two lines are Nagarjuna's response to that.
I think
sounds-
so.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, anyway, we'll try to have some more clarity for next week, but we'll talk a little bit on Monday. If our two scholars here could forward me any of that information, that would be good. Okay, so right before that, the lead up to that quotation said, if things are not established as devoid of intrinsic existence, if they're not proved to be empty of intrinsic existence, then since there is no third possibility, this would entail that things have intrinsic existence. Things are either non-inherently existent or they're inherently existent. This is clearly stated. We like the word clearly, like in clear words and everything, clearly stated in averting the objections or refutation of objections by that stanza. So then, as for the reasons why, continuing in Jimpa, although one accepts the thesis and proofs such as these, one does not become a Svatantrika Majjhamika. I have explained these extensively elsewhere, so I will not elaborate further. So I guess that's note 367, right? It says see for example, some Khapa's great treatise and the essence of true eloquence. So I guess that's what he's referring to there. So now we get to something a little more easily cognizable. How then are the two forms of negation defined? Or as Venerable Joan said, well, then what are the definitions of the two negatives? So we're talking about affirming negations and non-affirming negations, or implicative negations and non-implicative negations. To me, the first affirming and non-affirming sound easier to my mind, but maybe just because I'm familiar with them. In general, Jimpa's translating, negation is cognized by the mind on the basis of the explicit elimination of the relevant object of negation. Or in the FMT translation, in general, a negative phenomenon is an object realized by an awareness upon the explicit elimination of an object of negation. That seems more clear. So there are two kinds of phenomena, positive and negative phenomena. Negative phenomena are of various kinds, like we can say negations, implicative negations, and so forth. But in general, a negative phenomenon is something which is realized by an awareness upon the explicit elimination of an object of negation. When you explicitly negate something upon upon negating that, it is possible that your mind can then cognize a negative phenomena. So the determination of something as not being that which is not itself, e.g., a vase is not being a non-vase, is not itself a negation. So what the heck does that mean? So in the FPNT translation, therefore, the mere elimination of an object of negation in regard to things, such as the elimination of it not being itself, is not a negative. Suvash, what does that mean? You have any idea? No? Stephen?
The elimination, I'm sorry, I'm looking for that phrase within the FPMT text. Where is that?
It's on page 102, just about a third of the way down. There's a question, well then, what are the definitions of the two negatives? Reply, in general, negative phenomenon. A negative phenomenon is an object realized by an awareness upon the explicit elimination of the object of negation. Therefore, the mere elimination of an object of negation in regard to things, such as the elimination of it not being itself, is not a negative.
Well, that reminds me a little bit of eliminative engagers, and not being a non-cow is a cow.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's more to the point. So for instance, if you say the opposite of a non-vase, so, or non-pot, non-mug. So a non-mug would be everything else in the universe other than mug, right? The opposite of that, or the reverse from that, would be, or you could say that which is not a non-mug is the mug itself. So this is talking about kind of like a double negative thing. What does Jimpa say? So the determination of something as not being that which is not itself, e.g., a vase as not being a non-vase. So non-vase would be everything other than the vase. Not being a non-vase would go back to the vase. So that's a positive phenomena. That itself is not in itself a negation. Doris is putting thumbs up. Were you happy with that?
I'm sorry, Venerable. Stephen is aware that I might be confused, but I'm doing okay. That's what I was saying.
Okay. Good, yeah. Some of us are confused. I'm confused by double
I
negative.
am not doing okay.
Okay.
It's because it's like you're saying a non-base is everything but a vase. A non-mug is everything but a mug. And that everything that is not a mug is a mug. I don't get it.
No. So when we talk about earlier in other courses, when we talk about how mental images, what mental images are meant to represent in the logic of Dignaga, Nagarjuna, and Dharmakirti, they are said to be the let's say the mental image of a cow is like the reverse of a non-cow. So what does that mean? Non-cow means everything else in the universe other than a cow, right? Does that make sense? When you say reverse, that means the opposite of that. The opposite of a non-cow. So non-cow is everything out. So if you think of a three-dimensional puzzle, You have some void space in the middle here when you say non-cow. Where the cow was, now there's nothing. Non-cow is everything else. Now, the reverse from that brings you back to cow again. That means everything that is not non-cow. It's getting too many. So
Yeah.
So we would say mayimpa le lokpa, the opposite from what is not. So Jimpa puts in a useful example there. E.g., for example, a vase not being a non-vase. So is a vase a non-vase? No, but a vase is not a non-vase. Not be is not a non-vase. Okay. So a statement like that is not a negative, even though it has negative words in it. On the other hand, we find terms like ultimate nature and ultimate truth, which do not explicitly negate any opposites on the linguistic level. They're not using the words not or reverse or something like that. They're stated as positive things. Yet when their reference appear to the mind, they do so in the aspect of eliminating conceptual elaborations. Such terms are therefore terms of negation. So this is just some kind of sort of like, what's it called? Elaboration on talking about negatives. Some things that use negative words in them are not necessarily negatives. Like when we say the opposite of a non-vase, that's actually a positive phenomenon. It's the vase itself. But on the other hand, some things like ultimate nature and ultimate truth. So what is ultimate nature? Nadine, what is ultimate nature?
Shunyata. Emptiness.
Right, emptiness, right? So is that a positive or negative phenomena, shunyata?
It's a negative phenomenon.
It's a negative phenomenon, right? In fact, among the two negatives, it's a non-implicative or non-affirming negation, right? And ultimate truth. Stephen, what is ultimate truth? What is ultimate truth?
It is the lack of inherent existence.
So is that a positive or a negative phenomena?
That would be negative.
So even though the two words, ultimate nature and ultimate truth, or as the FPMT translates as reality or ultimate truth, even though they don't have any negative words in them, when their meaning appears to the mind, it is a negative appearing as having the aspect of the elimination of elaboration. So such terms are therefore terms of negation. So that's just sort of an aside, a sort of supplementary material. Okay, so now we get down to the actual definitions. Negation is of two kinds. Of the two, non-implicative negation or non-affirming negation does not apply or affirm any other fact following the explicit elimination of its object of negation. That making sense? That's probably quite common in other logic systems also. For example, when asked, are Brahmins allowed to drink alcohol? The response, quote, they do not drink alcohol, end quote, is a simple rejection of the drinking of alcohol. This statement does not affirm in any way that they do or do not drink other beverages. Or as FPNT translates, for example, when asked whether it is suitable or not for Brahmins to drink beer, Tsong, I guess, the statement, they do not drink beer, merely eliminates their drinking beer, but does not establish either they do drink or do not drink other drinks than that, drinks other than that. Almost, if they're human beings, you would almost think that it would imply they drink something else, right? But they don't drink beer. I'm not quite sure why that's the example that's used here. It seems like that would be implying something. Conversely, an implicative negation or an affirming negation, another way of saying, implies or affirms other facts following the mind's elimination of its object of negation. So once you've negated something, something else is affirmed to the mind. For example, when wishing to demonstrate that one of two individuals belong to the commoner's caste, or as FPMT says, a servant caste, if one utters the statement, he is not a Brahmin, this does not merely negate the person as being a Brahmin. While a negative statement, it also affirms that that person belongs to a caste other than that of the Brahmins, namely a commoner's caste. So that's by doubt. So that's an affirming negation. That's by doubt about the first one. Brahmins do not drink alcohol. Seems like that it implies, infers that they do drink something. So a little bit of unclarity in my mind about that. Okay. There are three ways such other facts may be implied by negative statement. There are three ways such other facts may be implied by a negative statement: through direct implication, indirect implication, or contextual implication. The first example, that is an affirming negation that is a direct implication or direct affirmation, is like the statement, no self exists. Or is, in the FMT translation, it says explicit suggestion. For example, the single phrase, selflessness exists. Jimpa translates it as no self exists. No self meaning selflessness, or the selfless. For example, the single phrase selflessness exists establishes both the elimination of the object of negation and the suggestion of another phenomenon. Whereby the elimination of the object of negation and the affirmation of other facts are both affected with a single declaration. What is being negated there when you say selflessness exists or no self exists? What's the negation part? It says it's an affirming negative. It says, whereby the elimination of the object of negation and the affirmation of the other facts are both affected with a single declaration. Hopka, what do you think? If I say selfless, the Buddha taught that beings are selfless. So if I say selfless exists, is that a positive statement or a negative statement? We're running in the basements of your mind, huh? Okay. Who wants to make a stab at that? Why is that a negative statement? Selfless exists. Sounds like it's an existence statement. Nadine, Nadine had her hand up for a second. Maybe she reevaluated.
The self is negated.
Self is negated. And
But
what's
something exists. So it's positive.
But the existence of selflessness is affirmed, right? Louise, what do you think? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, unmuted. All right, it's kind of confusing because it's affirming the lack of inherent existence, which is a negative, but it's affirming that the lack of inherent existence. So that's confusing.
It's affirming that the lack of inherent existence exists.
Right.
Okay, so it's not affirming. Yeah.
Well, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jimpa says, whereby the elimination of the object of negation and the affirmation of other facts are both effected with a single declaration. Or in the FPNT translation, it says, for example, the single phrase, selflessness exists, establishes both the elimination of an object of negation and the suggestion of another phenomena, or what she says, suggestion, Jimpa says, the affirmation, or let's say, I think it is Pempa, Dakmepa Yo Chepa Tabute, Dakcha Chopadang Chushempa Pempa. So the word Pempa is what we usually use for throwing, like throwing karma and so forth. So it throws another phenomena, or as FPMT says, suggests another phenomena, or as Jimpa says, what does he say here? Affirms another phenomena or other facts. So that one statement does both things. It is negating something. It is negating self-existence. Selfless exists. And it's affirming something, throwing something, like when we talk about an affirming negation, it's affirming something else after that negation, that selflessness itself exists. Okay? Okay, so the second example of the second is like the statement, stout dharma datta does not eat during the day, where another fact is implied indirectly. Okay, first of all, it's interesting, both the FPMT and Jimpa's translation have the name wrong. It's not dharma datta. The FPMT translates yajmana. Actually, it's chujin in Tibetan. Does anyone know what chujin means? Who knows their Tibetan? Jennifer, do you know some Tibetan? Have you done fire puja?
Oh.
So chujin is usually when we're talking about yajna. Let's see, what do we put here? Yajna datta. So it is someone who gives yajna. Yajna is like the special kind of offering to the gods and so forth. So this is the name of a person, chujin. Chu here is not the word for dharma, it's the word for offering. It's spelled like the Mao Cha Naro Chu Da Chu, meaning like Lama Chupa. It's that Chu. So chujin is yajna datta. Anyway, that's not that important. The second is like the statement, fat yajna datta does not eat during the day. He says stout, being kind. So what does that mean? FPMT says corpulent yajna datta does not eat during the day, or fat yajna datta does not eat during the day. So that would mean that as they are fat, they are a person. If they don't eat during the day, to become fat, they must eat at night. Right? So that is like the second case of something which is indirectly implied or indirectly affirmed when something is negated. You're negating that fat Yajnadatta eats during the day. You're saying that's not the case. But by implication, he must eat at night. Okay. Making sense? Habka? Making sense to you? Okay, good. Don? Yeah, sometimes sometimes I think some people mistranslated it as who is the Buddha's arch enemy?
Devadatta.
Devadatta. So sometimes I think I've seen people in other contexts it's translated as Devadatta. Fat Devadatta does not eat during the day. The implication is that he must eat at night. Okay. So these two respectively give specific examples of implying another fact directly or indirectly. Okay, so the first was selflessness. The selfless exists. Selflessness exists or no self exists. And the second, that's a direct affirmation or direct implication. And the second one is an indirect. Stout Yajnadatta does not eat during the day. I'm not sure where Jimpa got Dharmadatta. So he was taking Chujin. Maybe he just was thinking of the word without seeing the spelling, because Chu sounds like the word for Dharma, right?
I think that's how he spells it in his edition, Venerable George. He spells it Chanaro Sa Chu.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
So he's in his
Tibetan edition, yeah.
Okay. I did not check that. I was just checking with the ACIP edition. I will check the so that may be that that's another alternative of that name, Dharmadatta. So that would mean someone who gives the Dharma. Okay, these two respectively give specific examples of implying another fact directly or indirectly. Then an example where a fact is implied both directly and indirectly is the statement, again, we get to Dharmadatta. What does she have in her? Either corpulent Dharmadatta does not eat during the day, is not emaciated. What is it saying here? These two respectively give specific examples of implying another fact directly or indirectly. An example where a fact is implied both directly and indirectly is the statement, Dharmadatta, who does not eat during the day, is not skinny. Directly and indirectly. So what is directly? So does not eat during the day and not skinny. Those are two negative statements. So that's a negative statement, right? It's an affirming negation, both directly and indirectly. Because if he does not eat during the day, that implies indirectly that he eats at night. And then he said, is not skinny. That's a direct implication, right? He's not skinny. Making sense? Okay. The third type, what was the third type? Contextual implication is like the statement, he is not a Brahman. He is not a Brahman when stated in the context when it has not yet been determined whether the person is of the royal or Brahmin caste. in that context to say he is not a Brahmin, only in that, if you just say that without some context, that would be what kind of negation? He is not a Brahmin. Anyone want to take a guess? Jennifer, you thinking? Or if I just say in general, he is not an American. She is not an American. What kind of statement is that? That's a negative statement, right? Jennifer, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So just that, does that imply anything in its place? Well, here, this in the context of whether someone is a Brahmin or a royal caste, in that case, you say he's not a Brahmin. In that context, that means he's royal caste. So in the context of going to the embassy and saying she is not an American at the Russian embassy, that would by implication in that context, that would seem to be that she is a Russian, if you're going to the Russian, in that context, something like that. The third type is like the statement, he is not a Brahmin, when stated in a context where it has not yet been determined whether the person is of the royal or Brahmin caste. So if you're at the Russian embassy and you're trying to get in and you're saying, you're claiming that you're Russian and someone says, she is not American. So the guards let you in because in that context, the implication is that you're Russian. Maybe like that. Okay. Here the statement, what caste he is not explicitly made when you say he is not a Brahmin. But in the context of being either royal caste or Brahmin, it's implied by that context. How are we doing? Making sense? A text cited in the explanation of the commentary of the Lamp of Wisdom. So FPMT translation has a little bit more detail. It says, these are drawn from explanation in Avalokiteshvara's commentary on the Lamp of Wisdom, or Baba Viveka's lamp for Nagarjuna's wisdom. This says, so this is from commentary to Baba Viveka's text. Negation that reveals by implication that which affirms by means of one word, and that which does both but does not express the word itself. These are implicative negation. Others are different. So the FPMT translation says, negatives that indicate by the meaning established with a single phrase possess both of them, do not indicate by the phrase itself. Those other than the affirming are the other. Oh, so it's one of these complicated kind of verses that needs commentary itself. It's meant to be a commentary. So I don't think in Jimpa's translation is completely clear. Negation that reveals by implication. The FPMT says negatives that indicate by the meaning. I don't have the Tibetan right in front of me. Established with a single phrase. Jimpa says that which affirms by means of one word. Jones' translation says possess both of them. Jimpa says that which does both but does not express the word itself. These are implicative negation. Others are different.
Or I just put the Tibetan in the chat, Venerable George.
Thanks, Paul. Let me take a look here. Where is that? Is that at the top or the bottom of the chat? Oh, there we go. Paul Haggett. Gatpa Dongni Tempadang, Sikchik Drupar, Chepadang, Deden Rangshin Mitompa, Mayan Shenpa, Shenyano. Okay, so the note in Jimpa's text says, to correlate these to the three types of non-implicative negation. The first line presents what some Khapa lists as the second, indirect implication. The second line presents the first, direct implication, and negation affected by a single term. The third line, the final type, where implication is done both directly and indirectly. Okay, so that's good, useful commentary to that. Anyway, this is quoting this to show that there are scriptural citations talking about these different kinds of negations. So let's continue. Some assert that when a negation term is combined with a term that is affirmative, it is not a non-implicative negation. Or FPMT translates. Some say that when a negation term is combined with a term that is affirmative, it is a non-affirming negative. I think Joan has left off a negative particle there. Some say that when a negation term is combined with a term that is affirmative, some say it is not a non-affirming negative. Right? Should be. That's what's saying. Some assert that when a negation term is combined with a term that is affirmative, it is not a non-implicative negation. This is incorrect. Just because the term Brahman is affirmative, that does not preclude the fact that the statements Brahmins do not drink alcohol represents a simple elimination of its object of negation. This is analogous to the fact that just because sound itself is an event, is an evident fact, just because sound itself is an evident fact, a manifest phenomena, does not preclude sound's impermanence being a concealed phenomena. You know, when we talk about phenomena, there are three types of phenomena, right? Who knows what those three are? Stephen, do you know?
There's manifest phenomena, Venerable George. There's hidden phenomena, and then there is extremely hidden phenomena.
Right, deeply.
First, we can observe. The second, we can infer, and the third, we take on a reliable.
We can still infer it by means of,
Yeah.
of a reliable being, but
Being.
deeply hidden. Say, for instance, here, sound itself is a manifest or evident fact, evident phenomena. That does not preclude the fact that sound's impermanence, something a quality of sound, is a hidden phenomena or concealed phenomena. So when we're talking about impermanence of sound, we're not talking about gross impermanence, we're talking about momentary impermanence, which is something which can only be realized I'm having what was that newscast broadcaster on the TV on MSNBC at 12 o'clock. A lady, oftentimes she's about to say something and then there's a long pause, or I'm having one of these senior moments, words are not coming out. This is analogous to the fact that just because sound itself is an evident fact, is a manifest phenomena, that does not preclude that sound's impermanence being a hidden phenomena. Some others say that when a negation is paired with the subject of the proposition, for example, Brahmins do not drink. So what's the subject? Brahmins. And the negative, the negation is do not drink. Some say that some other fact is implied. This too is incorrect. So that's correcting me. Remember, I was saying that would seem to imply they drink something else. This too is incorrect. Brahman, for example, is the basis upon which one considers whether some other fact is being implied. It certainly cannot be the other fact that is being implied. Thus, to present the noble Nagarjuna's 4 propositions, Chandrakirti writes, not originating from self, and how from something other, not from both, and how from no cause. Or as FPMP translates, that itself does not arise from that. How can it from other? Neither does it from both. How can it causelessly? So what that's doing is in Chandrakirti's retelling of Nagarjuna's first stanza. Okay? That itself does not arise from itself. And how can it arise from something other? It doesn't arise from both, and how can it arise from no cause? That's kind of the essence of that. Not originating, not arising, not being produced from itself, namely from its own essence. How can the effect originate from something other? Causes that exist as other through intrinsic characteristics? It cannot. It does not originate from, originate from both self and others. And how could it originate from no cause? It does not. Now, were there things that possess intrinsic existence, this would entail that they arise by way of one of the 4 possibilities. Within the notion of intrinsic arising, there are only 2 possibilities: from a cause or from no cause. Within the notion of intrinsic arising, there are only 2 possibilities. Things can either arise from a cause or without a cause. So of the causes, it can be from a cause which is different, which is the same as itself, which is different from itself, which is both the same or different, and then without cause. And within the possibility of arising from a cause, there are only 3 possibilities: arising from itself, from other, or from the combination of both self and other. Therefore, these 4 positions are exhaustive. Okay, that's some portion of that was simple when it talked about the definitions of negations, but the rest of it was rather opaque, I think. So I wanted to just to mention some other thing. I will ask to be put up on the group page and on the Shantideva restricted page. When we were talking about the prefix for 2 in Greek and Latin, right? In Latin, it's bi. In Greek, it's what? Remember? Die, di, right? So this is from a web page. You could search this if you want. DI is Greek. BI is Latin. The Proto-Indo-European root for two is reconstructed as DW. Reason I mention this, when I was studying in Sarnath many years ago, for some exam for the University of Delhi, I was in Sarnath studying there, and one of the textbooks that had been suggested for the course was the explanation of the different words transition from Proto-European, Proto-Indo-European languages. So that means at the very beginning, the first words that were eventually became the Indo-European languages, like Latin and Greek and all of the others. There are some exceptions that are not Indo-European languages. They all had a primal root earlier. So the Proto-Indo-European root for two is reconstructed as DW. The remnants of this W can be seen in English, the English word two, TWO, in the Russian word dva. Anyone know Russian? What does dva mean? DVA. Does that mean two? Oh, okay.
Yes. Dva.
Okay. Dva. Ancient Greek and many other languages as well as the Latin duo, which means two, two people having playing or something. Old Latin had many words starting with DV, where the V was pronounced as English W. But at some point before classical times, DV changed to B at the beginning of words. So eventually Latin became more systematized. Although they had the DV at the beginning to mean two, eventually it became a B. Hence, the vellum, whence English duel, became bellum, war, and duonos became bonos, good. The word duo, two, itself had a vowel U rather than a consonant V. So it avoided the change. So anyway, I would suggest I'll post that up or have it posted. I'm too clumsy to get it up there myself, so I'll have some help just for you. And also an extract from a book by George Dreyfus called The Sound of Two Hands Clapping. Have anyone here have that book or know of that book? George Dreyfus was the first Western Geshe, I guess. Old friend I've known since I was a monk in the very early days. He's now a layman and teaching. And this is a book I would recommend very highly if you get a chance, but I will post a couple of successive pages into it with some things highlighted. And the highlighted portion, I'll read one part of the highlighted portion here. The identification of the object of negation, Dakchan Muzin, which some of you know, which is at the core of Lama Tsongkhapa's Majjhimaka interpretation, is described as the prerequisite for understanding emptiness, right? Recognition of the object of negation, identifying the object of negation. Then a little bit later, the crucial identification of the object of negation is not as straightforward as the brief sketch above might suggest. So there was some explanation how you try to identify it. Though it is necessary to understand emptiness, Tsongkhapa also recognizes that such an identification is problematic until one has realized emptiness. So you need to recognize the object of negation in order to understand emptiness. But Tsongkhapa also recognizes that such an identification is problematic until one has realized emptiness. So we're saying that in order to identify the object of negation, you need to have realized emptiness first. What is that called? So a little bit later, a couple of paragraphs later, so this is all in the pages that I'll send you. They're highlighted, the terms you can read in between the other terms. In terms of Geluk epistemology, so the Gelugpa tradition, their study of pramana and so forth, only after realizing emptiness can an individual understand fully the difference between the conventionally existent object and its non-existent reified essence. That part's okay, to my mind. In terms of, for Gelugpa, only after realizing emptiness can a person understand fully the difference between the conventionally existent object, let's say the mere object, and its non-existent reified essence. That means the appearance of inherent existence that is connected with it. Until you realize emptiness, you can't really realize the difference between them. But then the sentence continues, until then, the object of negation is identified not by valid cognition, but by correct assumption, icha. So I will give this as an exercise to those of you who are, up for some challenge to figure out what that means. Until then, the object of negation is identified not by valid cognition. So it's not identified by valid cognition, the object of negation, until you've realized emptiness. But until you realize emptiness, it is identified by correct assumption. Does that ring a bell with anyone? Okay, so I will post that, have that posted up also. And then one later thing, George Dreyfus was referring many times to Gen Nima, his teacher, who was considered, Gen Nima died many years ago, to be one of the foremost experts on Madhyamaka in the Gelugpa tradition. I remember meeting him one time only because Lama Zopa sent me to ask him a question. I think he sent me to ask him a question so that I'd have some karmic connection with Gen Nima. So he was a great, great scholar, very unconventional, looked very sloppy. His eyes were always red. I think at one time, I can't remember when I went to see him, I think he had to put in his teeth first. When I came to see him, he asked his attendants to bring his teeth. So he put his teeth in first so he could talk. So with regard to Gen Nima, he says, this is all in the section that we'll have posted. Although Gen Nima never explicitly rejected the emphasis on introspection, several of his more outspoken students did. One of his more advanced students explained to me privately, that means to George Dreyfus, so it's a Tibetan explaining to him, that reliance on the experiential identification of the putative object of negation presupposes an immediacy that is not available, given that such an identification can be made only after one has realized emptiness. So that's in the same sort of conversation about whether you can identify the object of negation before realizing emptiness. So that may give you some what is that, grist for the mill. So one later thing said, the object of negation is taken not as an observable entity, a kind of fixed target, but as the guardrail that prevents the undermining of essentialization from degenerating into nihilism, which is nothing but an essentialization of negation. Okay, anyway, enough of that. I just wanted to wet your whistle and for you to be up for the challenge. So before we end, any questions? Any comments? Observations? No? This was a tough section again. On Monday in the discussion group, we'll try to have some clarification about the quotation from the refutation of objections to clarify that a little bit. So, Snehi, if you'd like to put up the dedication prayers. Kewadi Nyurduda Lama Sange Trugyurne Droa Chikyang Malupa De Sala Gopasho. When we used to recite this with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he would put emphasis on the Droa Chikyang Malupa, not leaving out even one. Not, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings into that state, not leaving out even one, not your enemies. Changchub Semcho Grimboche, Make Panam Ke Gyuchig, Kepa Nyampa Me Bayang, Gone Gong Tu Pelbarsho. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losan father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please now bestow virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for mother living sentient beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And then finally, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, the supreme gateway for fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live in long and stable life. And just to remind you, today is the celebration of the Day of Miracles, the 15th day of Sakadawa, if I'm not mistaken, right? So karma is multiplied immensely. So if you have some virtuous actions that you're planning to do, even in the future, start them today, do some virtues today, and we will consider that the virtues that you created in listening to the Dharma, contemplating and meditating today as being, that virtue is multiplied. So try to seal that all the dedications that we just made in the emptiness of the three spheres. Myself and the merits and the virtues that were created, the collection of merit and collection of wisdom, do not inherently exist. They do function. They can be cognized and thought about, visualized even in some cases, but they have no inherent existence. They are merely names. The goals dedicated to my achievement of enlightenment for the sake of others, my development of bodhicitta, the quick appearance, reappearance of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and so forth. All of these goals can be cognized, they conventionally exist, but they are empty of inherent existence. And the process of dedication, connecting these virtues to those goals, wishing that they bring about those goals, that process itself can't be found anywhere. It's just a name imputed to that succession of mental thoughts. So thank you. Look forward to seeing you next week, and some of you on Monday if you have the courage. Thanks so much for attending. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
You all.
George,
Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
so
everyone.